If you attended Ground 2025, you'll probably remember the session, Accessibility in Times of Disruption. The fireside between John Fishwick, who is the Accessibility Manager at Virgin Atlantic, and Jerry Angrave, who is the Director of Customer Experience at Empathize, sparked real debate around how we can better support vulnerable passengers in disruption and how maybe we can use passenger segmentation in a larger role during disruptions. The response to that session made it clear that we had more ground to cover, and so we went back to all our airline leaders and said, listen, do you have more questions that you'd like to put to John and Jerry? And so what you're about to hear is John and Jerry responding to all the questions that came out of that session. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Matthew, and it's a real pleasure to have you join us again. John, welcome back. We had a fantastic conversation up in Reykjavik a few weeks ago about accessibility and the implications for when there's a disruption, a delay, a diversion, cancellation. And we've had some great feedback on that, so thank you for what you shared in that session. But we've also had some more questions. So let's roll into them, and it'd be great to get your thoughts, John, on these. We'll start with a slightly testing one. The model of low-cost carriers is obviously so reliant on quick turnarounds, efficient processing. Is there a risk that in carrying more disabled passengers, that puts those turnaround times at risk? And the question we had is, should there be a cap on the number of passengers who are presenting with an accessibility requirement? Should there be a cap on aircraft, or what are your thoughts on that, John?
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, that's a really interesting one, and something I've quite often thought about myself. I absolutely understand that for an ultra low cost carrier, they're turning their aircraft incredibly quickly, and that can have an effect when we have a number of accessibility customers on board. I think for me as an accessibility manager, I would say that actually we need to be making sure that all customers have access to flight and that all customers are treated with dignity and care. So from that point, I think I would be wrong to say that there should be a cap in place. However, I do understand that the business model that we're working with, and actually if we throw that a little bit wider, all airlines are working to tight timescales. We all have to be off the ground at a certain time, and we want to make sure we hit that mark. I think before we start discussing caps on the number of disabled people, what we need to do first and foremost is make sure that we have the most efficient processes in place to deal with those customers. So that is about looking at our own processes internally, making sure we have the right equipment in place, that our ground handlers are efficient, are moving customers at the right time. I think that's about us educating our customer as well, so that the customer knows exactly what they need to do to travel successfully on the airline they're wishing to travel on. The immediate one is for somebody in their own chair is as soon as it says go to gate, then please make your way to the gate. We can't have you turning up halfway through boarding because that is going to delay our flight. I think as well, we need to start thinking outside of the box as well. Even as a long haul carrier, we are starting to see flights arrive with 80, 90 customers on it with service requests. That does delay our flights as well. And we're working as an airline and with our airports to put in different methods of assisting customers, a more tailored approach, which still meets the customer requirements, still means they're traveling with dignity and care, but also means that we can, in a more efficient way, get the people from point A to point B. I think once carriers have done all of that, then absolutely the question you may be left with is, can we put a cap on the number of customers we have on board? I genuinely think that is a discussion that carriers need to be having with their local legislative bodies first and foremost. We must remember that it is enshrined in law, certainly in the UK, the US. I'm sure it is in other parts of the world as well. So it's about really looking to speak with the authorities, to speak with the disability community and have an open and frank conversation.
Yeah, no, thanks, John. Some really interesting points there. And as you say, a lot of it is around the communication, the understanding, the knowledge, the data about what that flight is going to look like? What are the requirements going to be? And I think if the bigger data sets and the more accurate, timely, reliable data we have about the passengers on board and their requirements, then that predictability helps us turn around aircraft a lot quicker. But that assumes there's a lot of systems, a lot of different functions across the airline estate that are all talking to each other. So yeah, it's not easy. But John, you made some great points for that. So thank you. Moving on to the next question, which is kind of related, but how the question is, how can customers provide advanced insights into their needs should something go wrong? And how can we convert those needs into actions? So how do we take that? What are some of the issues there, John?
Really good question. And I think, to be honest, I don't think we need to be going out to customers saying, how can we help you if our flight is delayed, cancelled, diverted? As we all know, every time a delay happens, it can look different depending on the time of year, the number of customers, the airport we're departing from. So I think I would actually flip it on its head slightly, and rather than us taking the information from the customer, I think we need to be providing the customer with the knowledge that they need. And in its simplest sense, to some extent, that is, making customers aware that things can go wrong. And, I always say to customers, please make sure you turn up early at the airport and make sure you put enough medication in your hand luggage to last 2 or 3 days. It could be your bag goes missing. It could be the aircraft diverts and we're not able to get it out of the hold when it lands. So I think that's the kind of information that we need to be providing to customers. I think beyond that, then it is about again, helping the customer to understand what is available if the flight is delayed or diverted. And being an EU carrier, we will provide meals appropriate to the time of day, and we'll also provide accommodation for customers as well. So again, it's just about informing them that if the worst does happen and there is a disruption, they understand what could happen for them and how we can help them. I think thirdly then, and it goes back to the point we were making during the discussion in Reykjavik, Jerry, that I think it is about us enabling our frontline colleagues to make informed decisions, to be able to talk to a customer in the moment and to make the right decision there and then. So that could be as simple as allowing the customer to relax in the lounge for a little bit on a slightly more comfortable chair. It may be for a long delay is giving them a day room in a hotel when perhaps other customers aren't receiving that. So it's about making sure that our frontline colleagues have the tools to use them in the appropriate way when the need arises.
Yeah, absolutely. And that they feel they're not going to get into trouble from their team leader by spending a few minutes talking to somebody to find a solution that would work for them. I think that's something that's really important. But on a related point, John, we had another question which is around how do we gather the information about our customers and communicate in a way that doesn't lead them to think that they're going to get preferential treatment. Yeah, do they think, because there's a risk, and we have seen in the times gone by when people have thought, oh, actually, if I ask for assistance, that's like a concierge or my private butler service kind of thing. How do we manage expectations with our passengers and our guests?
I think certainly from the assistance side of moving through the airport, again, it's being upfront with the customer and letting them know exactly what the assistant agent is able to do and actually what doesn't fall within their remit. So, sometimes that can be talking about luggage and porterage of luggage. Within certain jurisdictions, it may be covered, and within other jurisdictions, it may not be. Again, we look at duty-free shopping and things like that. And again, it is about actually what can the agent do and actually what doesn't fall within the remit of the service that you're booking. And it's about being upfront and transparent with that. One I see an awful lot at some of our airports is customers wishing to book a buggy rather than a wheelchair. And we have to be honest with customers to say that isn't an option that we can give you. We may use a buggy, or our assistance providers may use a buggy, or it may be a wheelchair. We're not able to specify up front. So I think for me, it's about letting the customer know up front what is available and what is not available as part of the service. Again, when we look at moving that into what happens if we're in disruption, then I think again it's about letting the customer know that yes, we will provide hotel rooms if it's appropriate. We will give meals. We will put you on the next available flight. That may be with another carrier. And it's also about perhaps keeping some of the pieces to ourselves. So we spoke earlier about empowering our frontline colleagues to maybe step outside of the box when appropriate, and absolutely we keep that to ourselves to start with, and we have that in our arsenal of being able to use in the moment when appropriate, rather than turning it into something that the customer expects to receive if they're in a disruption situation.
It's such an important point, that, John, and we saw that in the early days of the hidden disability sunflower lanyard, didn't we? Where it was the perception was, oh, that was a way for getting speedy boarding, or I can get to the front of the queue, or I can come through immigration in a special lane. And I think we as the airlines community learnt the hard way. Actually, we need to manage expectations. That it's not about any of that. It's just a signal, and a really clear signal, that if somebody, I use it with my son Charlie, if he is not making eye contact with a security guard, or if he's having a moment where he's looking quite shifty or anxious and nervous, it's not because he's drunk, not because he's on drugs. That's just where, and the lanyard really helps diffuse those situations. But yeah, it's not about getting onto the aircraft first. And actually, we've heard a lot of people who wear the lanyard, their preference might be to get on the aircraft last, because they don't like that energy, that movement, the noise, the anxiety of boarding in the middle of everybody else. So it might be that people who are using the lanyard want to board the aircraft last. So it's not about privileges or preferential treatment. It's just about the appropriate support that somebody might get.
Absolutely, Jerry. And I think you really hit the nail on the head, particularly with the sunflower lanyard, that it is a visible cue for our colleagues just to take that moment to think, hang on, there might be something else going on here. And particularly when we look at boarding, and you spoke about Charlie not making eye contact, or perhaps behaving in a way that people might think is a bit out of the ordinary. When we're at a gate, we're up against the clock, decisions are made very quickly. We need our colleagues to take that beat to say, actually, there might be something else going on here. Let me explore a little bit more before we refuse travel. Because if we refuse travel, the chances are, again, that is going to disrupt our operation. And nobody wants to be taking customers off at the gate who we could have carried with just a little bit more understanding.
Yeah, no, exactly. And one of the other questions that's related to that, John, was around, are there specific strategies for supporting passengers with hidden disabilities? And I guess one of the challenges here is airport airlines don't always know, because somebody who's got a hidden disability, as it's called, may not feel they need assistance. They just want people to be aware if something does go wrong. As you say, the staff have had the right training. So what are some of the strategies that airlines can put in place, particularly in the context of IROPS, when it goes off schedule? How might we help our neurodivergent passengers at those times?
I think first and foremost for me, it is about training our colleagues to understand that there may be somebody who has additional requirements, who stood in front of you, who absolutely looks like every other customer. They are called non-visible disabilities for a reason. It's because they're not visible. And so again, I think it's about training, and our colleagues just taking that second to understand and ask, can I help you? Is there anything that I can do? I think it's about being aware that, if we are making announcements at the gate or on board the aircraft, that, okay, many customers are able to hold a lot of information in a very short announcement, but some customers may actually need us to take them to one side to speak slowly, clearly, and help them to understand what is going to happen now and what is going to happen next. I think the other thing, and to be fair, this goes for all customers, to be fair, is that we are as open and honest with our communications as possible as well. I've been at gates where you look out the window and you can see the engine in pieces on the tarmac, and you're told, oh no, that's going to go in 10 minutes. And you think, no way is that going to go in 10 minutes. And so, if it is going to be an hour's delay, then as far as possible, let's be honest with the customer so that people can start to plan, to arrange, to reorder their priorities. And that is going to cause a lot less hassle for the customer. And again, avoid the chance of refused travel. Um, I mean, we've already spoken about it, that there are strategies out there, things such as the sunflower lanyard. I mean, it is such a great piece of kit for customers to use if they wish to. As you've already said, it is so visible. I would suggest it's the most important thing that customers who wish to wear it can use. And I think finally, again, it comes back to communicating with our customer. It's about educating our customer that, hopefully a customer will come to the airport, get on their aircraft, and everything will be fine. But there are times when disruption can happen, and particularly with neurodiverse customers, it's about them being able to plan for that, to understand that actually we may get on board the aircraft, we may even sit in our seat, and then we might have to get off that aircraft and we might need to go and get on another one. And if someone has been told that that is a possibility, or use a social story to look at the journey and understand the journey, then that's going to make that disruption so much easier for them. And by definition, reduce the delay on our aircraft itself.
Yes, yeah, and some of the services that you at Virgin have on board with the sign language interpretation, yeah, gestures like that, services like that go a huge long way to reassuring customers, particularly when things are happening that are unplanned, and all of a sudden everything's a bit of a surprise. To be able to communicate clearly, as you say, in not just in any spoken language, but in sign language, for example, is another great way that you can help passengers with those kind of hidden disabilities. But I think one of the issues is defining what do we mean by a hidden disability, because it's people with Parkinson's disease, for example, really some people struggle crossing thresholds. So if there's a kind of, if you're stepping off an air bridge onto an aircraft, that there's an inbuilt self-preservation system for a lot of people that really makes that next step really, really hard. So to your point, John, knowing your customers, knowing, being able to empathize, but also having the training, that word has kept cropping up, hasn't it, over the last 20 minutes or so. Yeah, the real training so people can address individual cases in the moment is such an important attribute for sure.
Definitely.
We're talking about experiences. One question we've had: have you had any particular memorable experiences that has sort of changed your approach or shaped your approach, John?
I think for me, having spent a number of years at a large airport as a hub carrier, I mean, I had lots of experiences with delay, disruption. I think for me, and I said it a lot probably when we were in Reykjavik, that what I don't want, and it's happened a number of times, end of the evening when we've not got any hotels left, we haven't, all the flights have gone, and suddenly we find a customer who has just been left somewhere in the terminal and suddenly comes to everybody's attention. And now we've got a disabled customer with quite complex requirements, and we have to deal with them late at night. That isn't a great experience for the customer, and it's going to add to the already stressful environment that we're in as a disrupted carrier. I think for me, and it goes back to the heart of it, that having experienced that a number of times, and I'm sure lots of airlines are doing this now. I think as soon as we start to slide into a disruption, whether that's one aircraft or a number of aircraft, we start to look at our customers who have additional requirements on board, and we start to process those customers as quickly as we can, whether that be putting them into hotels or putting them on the next available flight, or offering them a flight tomorrow so that they can go home and come back to the airport tomorrow with a guaranteed flight. I think that is probably the thing that I have taken away from this the most, that they really are our customers that we need to be taking care of to ensure that they are treated with dignity and with care.
Yeah, and we heard in Reykjavik that the importance of making early decisions, clear decisions, so everybody knows where they stand, and the importance of having somebody in that operational control center so there is one version of the truth, so that everyone knows what they're dealing with. Such a vital part of that equation. And another question, John. Could airports, rather than airlines alone, take more ownership of accessibility during disruptions, especially when multiple carriers share the same infrastructure? So I guess this would depend on the jurisdiction. But is there an opportunity there? Do you see, does one model work better than another?
Well, that's a really interesting point. And if it's just one carrier, disruption, particularly in our station, may not be as intense as obviously if the whole airport is shrouded in fog or snow or bad weather. I don't think this is about the airport versus the airlines or anything like that. I think this is absolutely about collaboration, and that is all the way through the disruptions, spectrum. That even if you've only got one flight delayed in an outstation, you're probably going to need the airport if you've got a couple of hundred customers suddenly on your doorstep needing help, and it's late at night. So for me, it's about collaborating. It's about sitting down with the airport and the other airlines. If the airport is in mass disruption, and this was something that we went through with an airport that I worked at, the airport actually put in specific holding areas for accessibility customers. So for that exact reason that I was saying earlier on, that, every now and again at 10:30 at night, you suddenly find a customer who's been left somewhere. What that allowed was that the assistance providers could take the customers who had additional assistance requirements to a specific place. Now, what that meant was, first and foremost, that those colleagues were then released from the job that they were doing to be able to go off and help another customer, rather than standing in a very long queue for a ticket desk for 3 hours. They're able to carry on with their work. What it also meant was that all customers who had additional assistance requirements were in one place. And as airlines, then we're able to go into that area to understand how we can help, how we can represent our customers individually. So I think that collaboration is really useful. And doing it with the airport as well, I would imagine that most, particularly hub airports, but large-scale airports, will have command and control structures. And I think it's about just sitting it in there. Where is the trigger point and how is it going to work? So I would urge all airlines to sit down with their airports to understand what processes are in place. And if there aren't any processes in place right now, well, what can we start to do? How can we start to get this process running much smoother when ultimately the operation has gone out the window, for want of a better way of putting it?
Yeah, and that brings us on really neatly, John, to our last question, which is around the measurement of those processes. And the question is, what if accessibility standards were built into disruption SLAs in the same way that on-time performance targets are? Would that drive accountability or complicate operations further? That's an interesting question, isn't it?
I think it really is, and I'm not sure there's a cut and dry answer to that. I think that will depend on what you already have in place. I think first and foremost, what is important is that airlines and their airports and their ground handlers all take the accessibility lens and just pass it over the processes they have in place. And we look to ourselves, what can we be doing first and foremost? So, as I said, we already, once we have a disrupted flight, will, particularly if we're offloading, changing aircraft, things like that, diverting, we will look to see what assistance customers we have on board, so that we have an understanding of the task at hand. I think beyond that, I mean, whether you want to start putting it into SLAs, then I think I would model whatever we have in place already. That if SLAs in other areas are reduced during disruption, then perhaps that is something that you would want to do for the PRM services as well. I think what is most important with PRM services is that we all look at it and we have a plan in place, and it has to be thought about, and we have to show, as airlines, as airports, as suppliers, how we are going to adapt when disruption rises. Now, that might just be one aircraft on for one carrier, one flight. Well, the disruption is going to be minimum. Or as we've already said, it could be the entire airport is closed, and we need to understand what we're doing. So it's really about having those detailed plans in place to make sure that customers who do have additional requirements feel protected, are traveling safely, and most importantly, are traveling with dignity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a piece here around measuring the right thing. Are we measuring processes? Are we auditing whether operations happen in the way they were supposed to? Or are we setting those SLAs based on what's most important to that customer? There's any experiences basically built up of, did it work? Was it reliable? Was it as expected? Was it easy for them to go on that flight and to navigate the complications when there was disruption? And then lastly, how did it feel? Because that, although emotions in a very operationally complex world doesn't seem to be a natural fit, that's what will drive their behavior next time. That's what will make them say, do you know what? Those guys took care of me when I needed them the most. So are we measuring that side of things, or are we just measuring the processes and the operations? So I think when we're setting SLAs, yes, it's really important, but I think it also is based around about the outcomes that the customer is having, as well as how our operations are performing at the time. So it's a really key one. And John, thank you. We are just about out of time, but John, thank you so much for your additional insights that you shared with us again. Thank you to everybody for joining us and for submitting the questions. I think if we were to sum it up, it's probably all around training, collaboration, data, being proactive, which I know is easier said than done. But please, if you have any more questions you want to put to John or myself, then please do so. In the meantime, wish you all the very best with all your disruptions, and I hope you don't have too many of them in the near future. But for the moment, thanks very much. And thanks again, John.
Thanks, Jerry. Goodbye.